Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Exploring Photography. I'm Mark Wallace, hanging out with Destany. And today we're gonna learn how to use a light meter in the studio. Now I'm using a fancy Speedmaster L858DU. This is a Sekonic light meter that I absolutely love. But the point is, you don't have to have this light meter. The stuff I'm gonna show you applies to every light meter that's ever been made. And so don't worry, if you don't have this light meter, the stuff that we're gonna talk about in this video still applies. So the thing that we need to do is to just solve the exposure triangle in the studio. And so what we're going to do is we're going to set our light meter and our camera to two parts of the exposure triangle, the ISO and the shutter speed, and then our light meter is going to solve for the third, that is the aperture value. So what settings do we use? Well, here in this studio, I have a bunch of video lights, and so what I want to do is I want to have the lowest noise possible in my camera, and I also want to eliminate all of the light from these video lights. So I'm going to set my ISO to 100. Now you could set yours to 100 or 200 or 400 or 800 or whatever the heck you want, but today I'm going to set mine to 100. And so what I'm going to do here is I have a little touch screen and I can set the ISO, so I have that set to 100, so I can make that go wherever I want. So I've set one part of the exposure triangle, ISO 100. On my camera, I also have the ISO set to ISO 100. The second thing I need to do is set my shutter speed. And so that is almost always set to the camera's sync speed. Now, if you don't know what sync speed is, don't worry. I just made a video about sync speed. And so on this camera, my sync speed is 1/200th of a second. So I've set the camera to 1/200th of a second, and I have set my meter to 1/200th of a second. You can see that right there. And so now my light meter and my camera have the same shutter speed and the same ISO value. Now what we need to do is figure out the proper aperture value. And that's where this light meter comes in. Because right now, I don't know what the proper aperture value is for this little light that I've set up. And so all what I do is I can use my light meter to meter the light to tell me how bright this is, to tell me what the aperture value is that I need to use on my camera. So the way to do this is we take our light meter, we come back here to our subject, and then we take this and we're going to point this little dome here. This little dome is called a lumisphere. So we want to point the lumisphere where the camera is going to be. So the camera is going to be right over here. So this is where my camera is going to be setting, right here. So it's going to be right there, but I don't want to put that there and block Destany. So my lumisphere should be pointing where my camera is going to be. So this way. So I'm going to press this little button on the side here. This is the metering button. And when I do that, click, the flash fires, it comes in, and then this tells me the correct exposure, which is, in this instance, f9. Okay, there are a few questions that you might be asking. The first one is, when I press this button, how does this flash fire? What's happening? Well, in this light meter, I have this little thing right here. This is a radio transmitter, and it is set to trigger this light. So this is wirelessly telling this light to fire. That's the nice thing about Sekonic light meters. You can get transmitters for Elinchrom or Profoto or Godox or almost any lighting brand, and so you can trigger that. If you have an older flash, what you can use is this little port right here, and you can actually put a cable there. Then the cable connects to your flash, and so you can do it with a wire if you need, and so that's how that works. So I'm using wireless triggering, and it works very, very well. Okay, so we've set, let's review, our ISO value, our shutter speed, and when we meter the light meter tells us if we have, or what the correct aperture value should be. Now in this instance, it's saying f9, but what if I wanted f4.5 or f16? So it's up to me to choose what aperture value I want. So let's say I want an aperture value of 5.6. So if I look at this, so I've metered the light, click, it's telling me f9. So what I can do here is I can go over here if I want 5.6, and I'll lower the light. So I'll lower the value of this light. So that is going to be lowered. And then when I meter this, now it's telling me I have a value of f5.0. It's not quite what I want it to be. I'll raise this value a little bit and I'll meter that light. And now it's saying 5.6. It's very, very simple. We put in the ISO value, the shutter speed, and then we meter the light, and then we increase or decrease the power of our strobe until we get to the aperture value that we want to use based on the depth of field that we desire. Now, that's the very basics. Very, very basic. Let's talk about a couple of other things. Let's first talk about this thing right here, this lumisphere going up or down. Why does that do that? Well, if we look at this lumisphere, you can see right here from the video light that we're getting a lot of light at the top and not so much at the bottom. So what the lumisphere is doing is it's looking at all the light all the way around, 360 degrees, light from the top, from the forward, from the bottom, and it's averaging all of that light to get a proper exposure. And so if we had several lights here, and I metered this toward the camera, it's looking at this light and the light from here, the light that's bouncing in, it's getting all of that stuff. But what if we just wanted to look at one specific light? Well, then we put this lumisphere down like that. And then when we come back here, we can point this to this light. So I'll do that. I'll meter this. And then it gives me a value of just that light, which is 6.3, which is a little bit different. So the reason that's a little bit brighter is it's only looking at this. It's not averaging in all of the dark light. And so we're metering for the highlights and we're letting the shadows fall into darkness. When we put this up and we meter toward the camera, we're metering for the highlights and the shadows. So that's going to be a little bit different. So the exposure is going to be a little bit different so that this is brighter, but also the shadows are averaged in. So if you want to meter just for the highlights and forget the shadows, we put this down, we meter it toward the light. If you want to average the shadows and the highlights, we put the lumisphere up and we point this to the camera and meter that. Okay, there's another thing that we can do with this lumisphere up or down. That's called delta EV metering. Let's do that next. Well, we started metering with just one light. That's our key light. Now we've added a second light, our fill light. And so when we add a second light or a third or a fourth or a fifth or a sixth, things get a little complicated and we need to meter things a little bit differently. So the very first thing we want to do is we want to figure out the difference between our key light and our fill light. So perhaps we want our fill light to be half as powerful, one stop less. Or maybe we have a kicker light. We want it to be one stop more or half a stop more or less. We want to set the ratios between our lights. How do we do that? Well, the nice thing is with Sekonic light meters, with this light meter and almost all Sekonic light meters, you have a function called delta EV metering. And it is wonderful. So delta, if we go back to math class, means difference, and EV means exposure value. So what you're metering is the difference in exposure value between one light and another. How much brighter is this light than this light? Or how much dimmer is this light than this light? So to do that, what we'll do is we'll put our lumisphere down. So lumisphere is down. I'm going to come in here. I'm blocking this light. I'm pointing this light to our key light from the position of our model. I'm going to meter that, and it tells me I'm at 5.6. So once I've done that, on the other side of this meter, I have a memory button. I'm going to press that, and now I have stored this value in memory. Now what I can do is there's this little button right here that says delta EV. Once that's pressed, now what I'm metering is the difference in value. So now I'm going to go over here to the opposite side. Now I'm blocking this light. I'm going to point this toward my fill light. I'm going to push and hold. And now this is saying negative 0.03. What that's telling me is the difference in exposure value is negative 1/3 stop. So this is just a little bit dimmer than this. I want this to be a full stop dimmer. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to drop the value of the power on this. I'm going to go back over here again, block this light, point toward this light, push and hold. And now that's saying negative 0.8. Almost there. Lower the power of this a little bit. There we go. Block this light, meter to this light, push and hold. There we go. Oh, I didn't do it right. Push and hold. And now we're at negative 0.7, which seems weird. I must have increased that power a little bit. Let's try that one more time. There we go. Negative 1. So this light is now exactly 1 stop less than this light. So now you're thinking, okay, we shoot at 5.6, everything works fine. That's not how it works. So what we need to do now is we need to meter both of these lights at the same time, because this light is going to add more light to this light, so it's going to meter more than 5.6. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here, I'm going to clear out the memory. So I've done that. Now the lumisphere needs to be up. Now I'll go in here. Now what I'm going to do here is I can't block one of these lights, and so I'm going to kneel down and worship. I'm going to meter toward the light, and now we can see that that's at 6.3, which is brighter than our original 5.6 because we added more light, so it's a little bit brighter. And now we can take a picture and get a proper exposure. So let's just do that and see what it looks like. So we've set our ISO value, we've set our shutter speed, now we've set our camera's aperture value to 6.3 is what our meter told us to use. And now I can just take a shot, bam, just like that. We have a proper exposure right off the bat because our light meter is always going to be accurate. Let's review all the steps for using a light meter in the studio. The first thing we need to do is set our light meter and our camera to the same ISO value and shutter speed. The light meter is going to tell us the correct aperture value. Next thing we need to do is meter our key light. So we'll go into our scene, we'll put our lumisphere up, we're going to point our light toward our camera, click meter, it's going to tell us the correct exposure. If we have 2 or more lights, we can just meter the light like this, making sure that we don't block any of the lights. We'll get a correct aperture value. If we want to know the difference between one light and a hair light or a kicker light or a fill light, we use our memory button. We meter our key light with the lumisphere down, put the value in memory, push delta EV, and then meter our second light. And then we look and see what that value is to adjust those ratios. And then we repeat that for any other lights in our scene. The last thing that we need to do, I didn't mention this before, I like to wear a dark shirt anytime I'm metering. The reason for that is if I'm metering light like this, I'm metering toward the camera, if I have a white shirt, I've just become a reflector and I'm going to change the exposure value of my meter reading. And so I like to wear a dark shirt so I'm not bouncing light into my meter. Okay, thank you so much, Destany. That was a down and dirty, quick way to understand how to use a light meter. Remember, if you want to know more about Destany, I've included a link to her Instagram in the description of this video. We have a bunch more videos about metering light, setting up different light settings, ratios, all that kind of stuff right here on the channel. So make sure you click the subscribe button. And if you have questions or comments, please leave those in the comments. And then thanks so much. We'll see you again next time.